To help manage the concrete pour on the lower part of this foundation, I'm putting it in plastic tubs so it's more manageable. It's important to work and agitate the concrete with my trowel. This helps remove any air pockets. With the correct volume of concrete added to our formwork,
you come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
So last week we got the outside edge of our staircase completed along here, which sets the profile of the steps. We've got our front edge locked into the deck. We also installed the treated pine timber retaining wall, which is going to define the steps on this side to a certain point, and then we're going to mirror the same form we put on the other side up along this side to create the outer edges of our staircase. But today we just want to lock in this side and put a couple of the cross pieces across to start forming our staircase. To align the left-hand formwork completely parallel to the right-hand formwork, I'm cutting a spacer that I'll use all the way up the staircase. This will ensure our concrete foundation is completely parallel all the way along the stairs. By securing the spacer to the right-hand formwork, it acts as a guide for the excavation necessary to install our left-hand stair formwork. It's important to keep the spacer completely level so it gives us an accurate width. I now have a guide for where to dig the trench for the formwork. I take a lot of time trying to set accurate marks for where I dig my trench and excavate the soil. It's important to keep the ground as undisturbed as possible. I'm trying to retain the natural compaction of the soil to aid in our foundation. This helps avoid subsidence and the foundation cracking in the future. When I've excavated enough soil and created a flat platform of dirt for our timber, I cut and fit the first piece of formwork that'll create the top half of our staircase. By using the timber spacer and some packers to get it at the right height, I set this piece of formwork in a mirror image of the formwork on the right hand side. After double checking everything with my square and level, I lock this piece of form into place with some heavy timber screws. I'm now ready to set the piece of timber formwork that'll establish the front of the steps, or the riser as we call it. I then repeat the process for the next two forms as they're identical duplicates of this first one.
But there's some words that I just want to say, to put it all straight before this night turns into day, and then I'm on my way. Yeah. Yes, I'm on my way.
I now move on to building the forms that'll create the steps that lead up from the deck. I'll be attaching the forms for these two steps to our treated timber retaining wall we constructed earlier. I used my set square and tape measure to pencil out exactly where the framing is going to be attached to the retaining wall. The plan is for this first step to remain completely parallel to the first piece of formwork we attached to the edge of the deck. Due to the length of these steps, I'm having to attach two pieces of timber together. I use a combination of the deck and my spirit level to ensure the formwork comes out dead straight.
You said, let me tell you everything I've seen, friends I've made, and then you tell me how you've been. Look a little closer, it's been quite some time. You gotta let me know if I'm out of line. But there's some words that I just wanna say, to put it all straight before this night turns into day, and then I'm on my way. Yeah. Yes.
I complete this first step by adding some bracing timbers that are secured to the deck. This is going to help stop the step from bowing out when we fill it with concrete later. I take a measurement of the span we want to cover one last time. I don't have any spare material on site, and it's a long way to the timber yard, so I often measure 2 or 3 times before I cut a critical piece of lumber. I've made a slight change for our staircase design for practical reasons. I've changed the riser height of the steps from 150mm to 140mm. This is due to standard material dimensions, and it'll avoid a lot of fiddling and cutting of materials later. The framing for our formwork comes in 140mm widths, so this will make it a lot easier for us to build our form for the concrete. The pavers I'll be gluing onto the concrete later also lay out at 140mm step riser without having to trim the paving material. I'm using some temporary scrap timber blocks to help align the end of our step form when we secure it into our treated timber retaining wall. When you drill screws in on a 45-degree angle, it can push things out of alignment. So by using these temporary blocks, it helps keep the timber aligned to our pencil mark. Once I've secured the form in place, I remove these temporary blocks as they'd be in the way of the concrete. Before I secure the other end of our formwork in place, I check it with my level. I do a lot of double checking with my spirit level as I assemble the formwork. It's a lot easier to make adjustments to the timber formwork than to have to adjust the concrete by grinding it later. I add some bracing timbers to the second step, tied into the lower step. This is going to ensure that both steps end up completely parallel to the deck and don't move out of alignment when we pour concrete in them.
Underwater, so far out at sea, there's no cure for what you're telling me, and soon I'm on my way. Yes, I'm on my way.
One of the last things I need to do before we pour concrete into our form is plug a gap we have between the edge of the deck and where our formwork starts. I'm using some of the concrete pieces we removed from the pathway to help fill this void, so our concrete won't spill under the deck when we're pouring it. I'm adding some sand and gravel mix on top of the concrete chunks we added, just to ensure there's no voids for when we pour our concrete later. We've completed all the formwork for our staircase. Had to add some extra framing here in the middle because these steps are so long. They're almost 4 meters long. And what can happen is when you pour your concrete, the formwork could push out. We'd end up with a bowed step. So by locking these pieces in, it's going to hold it all together and the concrete won't be able to push it out of whack. The flood over the weekend caused a bit of a washout and a void at the very front of our structure right here. So I've added all this concrete and gravel, so when we pour our concrete it doesn't spill under the deck in this void that was along here, so that's all nice and solid ready. The next thing I'm going to do is prepare all the reinforcement steel in preparation for our concrete. We're going to be pouring this in 3 pours. The first 2 steps with a sort of overlap to about where I'm sitting, and the next pour would be this triangle I'm sitting in with the next platform step, and the third pour will be the last 2 platform steps. The main reason I'm breaking this concrete form up into separate pours is the logistics involved in how much concrete I can mix and put into a form properly in one day. By having reinforcement bar set into the concrete and exposed at the end of each pour, we can connect the following pour securely. Using the rebar in this way ensures all the separate concrete pours end up as one homogeneous foundation that will create the support we need for adding our pavers later. The configuration for our reinforcement system for our concrete is to use heavy 12mm rebar as a base and then lay a lighter mesh on top of it. Because this pathway is designed for foot traffic and not vehicles, we can get away with using a much lighter mesh. I use purpose-made plastic supports to hold the 12mm rebar at the right height. I set this up as a support framework to lay the lighter mesh on top. After cutting the mesh to the right size with my grinder,
I tie it to the 12mm heavy rebar with wire. This will help hold it in place as we pour concrete into it. One of the important parts of this process is to make sure that all our steel is sitting about halfway in the slab we'll be pouring later. In this case, it's a 100mm slab, so I want all the steel sitting about 50mm above the ground.
Cutting grass and chopping wood, to be romantic, sipping coffee under the apple tree. This gentlemanly, well, you're a good man, quite the best man, a real fine man. When the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. And there's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back.
I give the area we'll be pouring our concrete a light hose down. We want to dampen the soil so the concrete doesn't dry too quickly, and also want to wash out any sawdust or debris that might be in the way of our formwork. To help manage the concrete pour on the lower part of this foundation, I'm putting it in plastic tubs so it's more manageable. Concrete's really heavy, so keeping it portioned out in manageable plastic tubs helps me move it into the corners and through the nooks and crannies of our formwork without putting too much stress on my body. It's important to work and agitate the concrete with my trowel. This helps remove any air pockets that create voids and weaknesses in our foundation. I also periodically tap or hammer the sides of the formwork. This also helps remove all the air from the concrete. I'm using a standard concrete recipe of 6 parts sand and gravel to 1 part Portland cement. This will result in a really strong foundation to support the pavers we'll be sticking on later.
You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. And there's no use looking back, going back, wishing back. You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. And there's no use.
It rained off again. Just not unusual around here in Gippsland. Weather comes and goes. It wasn't supposed to rain much today, but anyway.
I had to pause my concrete pour whilst the heaviest part of this rain passed over. Luckily for us, the rain can't really damage our concrete too much because we're sticking pavers on top and we're not trying to have a finished concrete surface. The rain really won't have much effect.
I have seen many places where the beauty never ends. Different cities, friendly faces, and perhaps I'm going back. But I don't have to be chasing every dream that I have. Oh, 'cause the thing is, I've got more love here than I can bear. Ooh. Of all the magic places in the world I've been to, this is where my heart is. Oh, you know it's true. No matter where I go, I'm coming home to you. Been walking down the street so many times, my feet know every brick and stone. Could wear a blindfold, no matter what
volume of concrete added to our formwork, it's time to add the reinforcing steel. This will provide a secure connection point between the slab we've just poured and the one we'll be pouring on top of it tomorrow. Here I'm making good use of some scrap pieces of heavy mesh I used on a previous job. I set this rebar 50mm lower than the top of the next slab. This way the mesh for the next pour will be supported at the right depth for the concrete. This concludes the first pour of our foundation. Join me in the next episode as we continue pouring concrete as we ascend up the hill to complete all 6 steps.
Of all the magic places in the world I've been to, this is where my heart is. Oh, you know it's true. No matter where I go, I'm coming home to you. Been walking down the street so many times, my feet know every brick and stone. Could wear a blindfold